Alrighty, hello everyone. My name is Elijah Kinnear.
My name is Tommy Mulcairns.
And welcome to Deconstructing Politics, your only source of news that is run by 20-somethings. So in today's news, I don't know if you guys saw, but Israel staged a major ground operation in Rafah. If Tommy would like to take that off.
Sure. So last night, Sunday night, Israel attacked I believe it was a UN camp a couple hours before the Knesset declared it a terrorist operation. Once again, this is a UN camp. There were a lot of innocent people who were staying there, and they were bombed last night. People burned alive in their tents. The videos have been all over social media. And then today, Netanyahu came out and said, whoops, our bad.
Yeah, he called it a tragic accident. Now, I don't know about you. An accident is when I accidentally have a little fender bender on the road. This is essentially crashing your car into a preschool.
Yeah, I mean, this has been his line for pretty much everything that they've done, right? Like when they accidentally bombed the aid trucks, every time he attacks something that's from the UN, Netanyahu comes out and was like, our bad, we didn't know. And even though we're giving them hyper-precise missiles, they're supposed to be able to target it directly. I think that there's no denying at this point that they're killing civilians.
Yeah, and you're telling me that the intel services of Israel can't discern which is like a civilian and a military target? I don't think so.
And like this is at the same time where they're stopping aid trucks from going in because they have to check for like Hamas food or like Hamas. I don't know why they're holding up these aid trucks for hours at a time, and it's created this gigantic bottleneck, which was why Biden did the whole pier. Mm-hmm. And then that pier has pretty much done very little to help the problem. Completely not solved the bottleneck.
Well, actually, I saw an article that got washed away recently. Like it collapsed.
Did it really?
Yeah. So that's completely gone. And also, yeah, like I don't know what they're talking about with Hamas food. I didn't see any branding on it. Each loaf of bread comes with a green bandana around it, I guess.
I mean, like this is what we were talking about with the encampment. We had it running. We kept calling all of the food Hamas chicken or Hamas pizza because it was all funded by Hamas. I mean, it's all very clearly just trying to stop any aid from getting into civilians. It's very clearly not about Hamas, right? Like Hamas is just the cover to be able to brutalize and genocide this population.
Oh, absolutely. And what you're seeing in Rafah is absolutely just the latest and the most transparent, horrible thing that they've done. I mean, we're talking about a UN camp that did not get warning for evacuation, that they just bombed. And like I said, like Tommy said, people were in fire in their tents. It was absolutely just horrible.
If for people who are interested, it's a very gruesome video, but on a UWM, the number 4 Pally Coalition on Instagram, we uploaded the videos that came out where you can see very clearly what Israel is doing to these people and what it looks like when you commit a genocide. It
is, trigger warning, very horrible. Just the worst thing ever you could probably see. It's, like I said, latest and the most transparent acts of genocide in our modern day.
And I mean, to be clear, like this is the kind of stuff that Milwaukee Halal and some of the other groups who came out against our agreement, they support this. They see things like this and they're like, this is what we want. This is what we want to see happening.
Yeah, like they were really mad over us calling it the campus calling it a plausible genocide, but meanwhile you have acts of genocide being played out in front of the entire like international like psyche at this very moment. And they are just turning a blind eye or actively are accepting this thing happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm very proud of the coalition for putting out a statement on it and for very specifically calling out Hillel and the MKE Jewish Federation. Because, I mean, these groups 100% are standing in support, wanted us to be arrested for protesting terrorism, or not terrorism, for protesting the terrorism of the IDF and the genocide that they're committing right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. Just wanting to get us arrested, basically not accepting anything less than us getting arrested. It's absolutely insane. They essentially want no criticism of what's going on. They want no pushback, because the second that people actually start pushing back, the second that people start recognizing what is actually happening in Rafah, then people are going to start waking up and things might change.
Do you think that they buy, like, when Netanyahu comes out and is like, whoops, our bad, we did a genocide? Do you think that the people there buy it? Or Or do you think that they know what's happening?
I feel like this is just like an excuse. Like, there's no way. Like, you can't say whoopsie daisies to like bombing civilians. Like, that's not how it works. You can't just be like, oh, our bad. Like, I remember when Obama like bombed that hospital. It was like, there's no accident about that, man. When the Iraq War, the war crimes, that's no accident. But suddenly, when it's Israel, it's like, no, yeah, that was just a whoopsie daisies. Didn't mean to burn those kids alive.
And just some more information on what happened last night. World leaders denounced the deadly strike in Rafah, saying it shows the need for a ceasefire. So the blast and subsequent fires killed at least 45 people. And again, these are people who were sheltering in a camp, basically a refugee camp for the people who had been forced off of their land in northern Gaza and through central Gaza. This was the only safe place that they had.
Yeah. It was a UN-designated safe zone. It was never a valid military target. But yet Israel has basically justified it by saying that there was a Hamas installation there, and it's claimed it killed 2 senior Hamas militants. Now, I don't think 2 senior Hamas militants, even if they were there, and I think we all know they probably weren't, I don't think that's worth the cost of 45 innocent people, mostly women and children.
Yeah, and the World Court appeared to order Israel on Friday, so this was before this offensive, to suspend its military offensive and any other action in Rafah, according to New York Times, that might wholly or partly destroy the Palestinian population there. I think it's crazy that Netanyahu keeps seeing this and like keeps getting condemned by all these international courts and just continues to do what he wants to do. I mean, it shows just the brazen confidence that he has that U.S. will keep sending him weapons, keep sending him money. And I mean, it makes us, like, Republicans are always talking about us looking weak. There's nothing that makes us look more weak than us saying, hey, don't do that. And then Netanyahu does it, and then we're like, okay, fine, here's like $4 million and also some guns.
Hey, Netanyahu, can you stop killing kids and innocent people? No.
Right.
Oh, well, guess we can't do anything.
Well, and there's an old interview with Netanyahu where he basically says, like, I can do whatever I want, and the U.S. will continue to back us. Like, I think what Netanyahu understands is that we have an interest in him being there, right? Like, we have an interest in Israel being in the Middle East, and therefore we can't just turn our nose at them.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like what we talked about last show, where we talked about the fact that we have interest that we prop them up because they are like based in the Middle East. We need them to be there, and as I said before, like even George H.W. Bush was saying, who's the superpower here? Right. Is it Israel or the United States?
Oh, here's Netanyahu's full statement. Despite our supreme effort not to harm uninvolved civilians, a tragic accident occurred to our regret last night. He accused Hamas of hiding among the general population, saying, for us, every uninvolved civilian who is hurt is a tragedy. For Hamas, it's a strategy. That's the whole difference. And again, we're sending these people hyper-precise missiles. They're supposed to have some of the best intelligence in the world, and they're still just like, yeah, our bad. You know,
you're telling me the intelligence service that was able to track down like every Nazi war criminal after World War II can't know like where Hamas is? Mm-hmm. Like, nah.
Well, I mean, like, that's the whole thing is he's going in to try and stop Hamas. But again, what's a better way to breed a Hamas 2.0 than by killing people's brothers, fathers, mothers, daughters? Like, you're just creating more Hamas.
You're just radicalizing people even more. You're just giving more fuel to the fire for people to be going against you in a radicalized way.
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, giving up like any of your international standing that you had.
Yeah.
You were absolutely like Netanyahu fell right into Hamas's trap. This is what they wanted. They wanted him to isolate himself. They wanted him to lose the support of people like the U.S., which surprisingly is happening a little bit. Like, these world court condemnations are huge, but I don't think that it's enough to stop the genocide.
No, we need like actual UN intervention. We need like people to like go in there and force those arrests. Like, you're not going to get him to come. I mean, you're not going to get him to suddenly land in a country that's going to want to arrest him with these. So there needs to be hard action.
And this is what students are protesting. So we have an update on the Lawrence situation. Lawrence came to an agreement. So the Lawrence University encampment started, I think it was last week, on the president's lawn. It was partially in response to a new protest policy that Lawrence University put in place where protests need 48 hours approval. It was on the president's lawn, and they were demanding a code of ethics for investment, which I think is a smart way to go about it, smart way to go about divestment, because there's a Wisconsin law that you cannot disclose or divest with Israel. You can't engage in BDS. It was slipped in there during Walker's term. So instead of saying specifically, we want you to pull our investments out of, or pull your investments out of Israel, develop a ethics for investment.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to go about it. That's a good reframing, especially what you like the arguments we heard on other encampments and on other universities. Like they have the foresight to be able to look at those and be like, okay, this is how we're going to tackle it. So I think ethics code of conduct when it comes to investments is a really great way to tackle that and potentially find a loophole to the law just being the law.
Right, and so on top of that, pulling out investments and then developing a new code of ethics, the Lawrence kids also wanted to rescind the recent protest policy where protests need 48 hours approval. I think it was last night or 2 nights ago, protesters came to an agreement with the university. So the policy was suspended. It wasn't completely taken out, but it was suspended until next August, when they're going to basically meet with students and the community to redevelop it. And the promise to make a process for better communication of policies between students and universities. So that was the agreement, and the Lawrence kids took down their encampment. I guess that they like the terms of it. What do you think of it, Eli?
I think it's definitely a solid win. I mean, for what we were hearing, they were pretty tiny. And they didn't have the man force and the support that we had here up in Milwaukee. And that's at least something that you can get from it. It's definitely not what they got out of Madison. So hopefully we get to see actual movement. But yeah, I got to commend them. A university that small up in Appleton. I was surprised it was even in Appleton. I didn't even think that sort of thing would happen. So I think any movement, any like solid movement in that direction is really good.
Well, I think that they had an SDS chapter, and anywhere there's an SDS chapter, there's going to be an encampment.
Those SDS goes hard on those things, and God bless them.
SDS is Students for Democratic Society. They were super popular during the Vietnam War times, fell apart because some of them wanted to bomb stuff, some of them didn't want to bomb stuff, and then reformed. And our coalition, UWM for Pally Coalition, that did our encampment, SDS was a huge partner to our group, the YDSA. So huge shout out to SDS.
We really got to do an episode on Weather Underground. I think that'd be like a good like educational episode because SDS like half of them were like, oh, we gotta do reforms, and the other one was just let's just bomb stuff.
I mean, I think I've told you about this, Eli, but I interviewed last semester one of the people who was in Weather Underground who did the Madison bombing, the Sterling Hall bombing. He was at the time it was the largest act of domestic terrorism, so he went on like the domestic terrorist to juice card salesman pipeline. Wound up selling, so he served like 2-3 years after doing this bombing, which killed one person, and then went on to start a juice cart.
That's crazy. That's wild. All right. Well, do you want to get into the other news? I really want to talk about the Libertarian Convention.
Sure. You explain it because I'm not aware of what happened.
Okay, so for those that don't know, recently Trump got to speak at the Libertarian National Convention, and it did not go well. Got to give some shout out to the Libertarians. They were booing during most of his speeches, and knowing Trump, he just started quipping back, being very petty. So
he's a diva.
He is a diva. Trump's a diva. Yeah, you hate the man, but he is a diva. One of my favorite quotes to come out of that is he was advocating for them to endorse him, like a libertarian endorsement for president. And he said, you should endorse me if you want to win, only if you want to win, but unless you want to keep losing and getting 3% every year.
Which, I mean, is kind of true. Libertarians never, like Gary Johnson was the only notable candidate I remember, and I remember him falling off the stage and then also not knowing where a place in Syria was. So.
You didn't know where Aleppo is.
Yeah. It's like, what's Aleppo?
What's Aleppo? It's the Libertarians, they're very goofy just in general, but I got to commend that. Just booing him the entire time. He's quipping back at them. It just seems like an utter disaster. And then now, like after the convention was over, they actually ended up nominating the Libertarian National Convention nominated for president a candidate that said he would run on ending the genocide.
Interesting. They're taking the Green Party route because that's what I know Jill Stein has been all over Instagram. She was arrested because she went out to the student encampment, so she's like, I'm the only pro-genocide candidate. I guess she can't use that line anymore.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like that's the move if you're a third party right now, is being against the genocide and being pretty like anti-Israel's actions in Gaza, because like the two main parties are moving on it. So I mean, that's a great way to pick up votes.
Where does RFK stand on it?
He's actually a huge Zionist. He has like a lot of Zionist connections.
Yeah,
the little brainworm told him to. I don't know. But RFK is still doing his crazy stuff. But the Libertarians and the Green Party are taking a very solid stance on that, and
They were like the Democrats specifically were worried about spoilers for like, a couple months ago. This was like all anyone was talking about, and then Joe Biden just handed third parties like the best way to siphon off voters from the Democrats and Republicans. Just handed it to them on a silver platter.
Literally, just like one of the biggest issues that is concerning young people and like really progressives and a lot of people on different sides of the aisle, and just handing it to them on a silver platter saying, hey, run on this and you might get like 3% in national funding. Like, go ahead.
Right. I mean, and they're not getting any APAC money, the third parties, but they're definitely, like, I think you're going to get a lot of students who are fed up and are not going to vote for Biden.
Oh, absolutely. I can see the average edgy like libertarian on campus voting libertarian and netting people in because of, you know, the anti-war statement from the nominee.
I think if the libertarians took a big stance on age of consent laws, they would get a lot more libertarians voting for them, because that's all libertarians care about. Is they're like, we don't want government intervention, and then when you ask them where, they somehow are always like, yeah, we think that like 18 being the age of consent is crazy.
It's actually really funny. Another Trump zinger from that was he was talking about, I think it was like sexual assault laws, and he was talking about actually like weakening them, and he said, you guys would know all about that, wouldn't you?
To the libertarians?
Yeah,
oh,
like
that's
something along the lines of that. I was just like, oh my God.
It's because most of their ideology comes from like 17th, 18th century French philosophers, and they have the craziest takes on age of consent.
Oh my gosh. I still hold the position, like, Trump is a horrible person, but can we keep him as a court jester? Like, give him like a little segment on TV where he just like complains and talks bad about everyone, you know. That's it.
I'm really shocked, though, that he got a bad reception from libertarians, just because that seems like his crowd, right? Like, when I think of libertarians, I think of, like, the podcast bros, and they're, like, a lot of them are very pro-Trump.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, a lot of those libertarians, though, just hate politicians, any and all politicians, so I bet that's where they're getting it from, because he was talking about how persecuted he is, and they all started booing. So I was also surprised, but then I was just like, yeah, that checks out. Knowing the average libertarian voter, you know, like your average like weed legalizing, tax hating guy, probably could hate Trump. I could see it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a great move to go up there and be like, you guys suck, you guys keep losing, vote for me because I'm better than all of your candidates. Like, not a great way to get people to vote for you.
I say just let him do it at like every third party like convention. Like get him to the Green Party and PSL's conventions. I want to see it. I think it'd be really funny.
Into the Green Party?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Could you imagine? Oh my gosh. I want to see him talk about Jill Stein. I just want to see Trump like talk bad about people. That's when he's funniest. And then I remember he's like an evil fascist, and that's where I'm like, oh well.
Man, he only spoke for 34 minutes.
Yeah.
Trump's a rambler. That's crazy.
He was yapping.
Yeah, and I just think it's funny because I'm looking through an article here, and it says, in 2016, Libertarian presidential nominee Gary Johnson earned more than 3% of the popular vote, a high point in the party's history. Like, Trump was kind of right, you know?
Yeah.
They keep getting 3% every 4 years.
Well, we know this, you know, as leftists. Like, they're beating the two-party duopoly is nigh impossible. It is like an upward battle, and like the Libertarians and the Green Parties have been fighting this for a very long time. The closest the Green Party got was Ralph Nader, like 24 years ago in 2000.
Yeah. I mean, well, what do you think is the answer then, right? Because there are two candidates who both suck. And there is no viable third-party option. So do you take over one of the bigger parties? Like, as leftists, do we want to take over one of the big parties, start our own party? What's the answer?
I feel like if you look historically, there's multiple ways of approaching this, but I really like the approaches that, like, historically, like, democratic socialist parties have taken. Like, for example, the Labor Party, when that first came about, started off as, like, a genuine, like, radical democratic socialist faction. And what they would do is they would run candidates under kind of what we do in the DSA. They ran under the Liberal Party, but were also with Labor. And over time, they built enough candidates nationally, both in local elections and national elections and in Parliament, that when Labor broke away, they actually had a sizable portion in Parliament. And then in the next election, they just destroyed the Liberals. So I think the idea of like building inside, and then when it's advantageous to break away is the move.
Yeah, that's fair. Kind of wait for the perfect moment. Like, how do you build up a national base when, no one even pays attention to third-party candidates because they're considered unviable? Like, I think that that's been, like, Jill Stein's problem is that she can't like, build her base because no one gives her airtime, no one brings her to debates, nothing like that, so she's kind of just dead in the water.
I mean, like I said, I think that's exactly what kind of DSA in some ways is doing, right? Of course, we can talk about like our elected candidates and like our criticisms, but in a lot of ways, that's what DSA is doing, right? Is running under the Democratic Party, but having these like DSA people, like I think. I'm not sure which state it is. I think it was a southern state like Louisiana or something, but a local election, like a DSA activist was elected to state legislator. So someone that is in DSA, you could say cadre, that gets elected under the Democratic Party into government. That's how you do it.
Well, that was kind of what, I mean, Cory Bush, I don't know if Cory Bush was necessarily explicitly a DSA member, but that is pretty much what Cory Bush is, right? Like a leftist activist who was able to win their nomination. But then, I mean, you also have people like John Fetterman, like where that's sort of what they are. But then they either get changed by the system or, well, from what I understand, Fetterman's right-wing turn has been a bit because he started consuming, like when he had his stroke, his aides controlled a lot of his media diet. Like they were just giving him basically shortened summaries of what was happening in the media. And lately he's been getting back into his own, like looking through the media, and he's been following a lot of right-wing sources like the right-wing or the New York Post, Fox News. So, but anyway, my point there is that like, even if with Fetterman that's a different story, but I do worry about the incentives of the system pulling people to the right and kind of gutting them of any like revolutionary teeth.
Well, yeah, I mean, we kind of saw that with Jamal Bowman to an extent. I mean, when he voted for Iron Dome funding, despite being a DSA-endorsed candidate. And I think a lot of it just is that DSA, I mean, if you look at DSA when it comes to, like, elected candidates, we see, like, this started in 2018. So, of course, that's not a long time. That's 6 years ago. And when it comes to elected politics, that's not a long time ago. So it's still a long-term project, and we're feeling it out. But I think for like every John Fetterman, you have like 2 Cory Bushes, and that's the idea, is to feel out, okay, where did we misplace our support in a fake progressive who is now a rabid Zionist, and where do we have imperfect candidates who maybe vote on the wrong policy because they get pulled right, and then who are like the true cadre, like activists who get put in and that we can full-heartedly support. I feel like putting more thought and effort into just figuring that out and still building from there, because I still think like Labor Party was around in like the late 1800s, and it took till like 1910s for them to actually become their own independent party.
Well, I mean, you could argue that the Labor Party, like that's exactly what I'm talking about. The incentives of the system have pulled them left or to the right. Like they may have started out as like some type of socialist adjacent party and like some sort of labor-driven party, but I mean, it's hard to argue now that they're not basically just Democratic Party 2.0.
Oh, absolutely. If not worse, I mean, I would say Keir Starmer's the prime minister of the leader of the Labor Party. He's honestly worse than Democrats in a lot of ways, but I feel like when it comes to this idea of like, you got your left-wing party getting pulled right, it's all about just building that cadre activist base, building that base in politicians and tradition within activism, and then just keeping it. And of course, there's so many ideas, as leftists love to do, disagree about what that will look like, how you build that and how you keep it. But that's like just generally like the ultimate question. How do you keep that party, especially when it gets into power, from pulling away?
Well, and I think it's the question of like, how do you keep these people, and basically what you're saying, accountable to a mass movement, right? Like what you want is people who are of the movement who are going to be accountable to it. And I don't know what that accountability mechanism looks like necessarily, because I think that once someone gets into office, especially within like the DSA, like our DSA electeds, once they get into office, they have a lot more leverage over us than we have over them. And I don't know how to make it so that, short of like denying them an endorsement and like our ability to go out and knock doors, there isn't much that we can do to keep them in line at this moment.
I would say, actually, there was a really good tweet on this. I can't think of the account right now, but essentially what they were saying is that what happened with Jamal Bowman is that when DSA endorsed him the first time, we were very late to the conversation. It was late into the election process. So Jamal Bowman already had this huge structure of door knockers and activists and volunteers. So we didn't really need DSA. So there wasn't that pressure to like keep up with our standards. But with the second time, we have the opportunity to get involved very early in the campaign and get them through the primary and through the actual election. So it's the idea of like, if we make the candidate reliant on the activists and the base that we have built up, then that provides the pressure. And I feel like once you have to build that first. And then it all comes with building power. Once you build that base, once you have people more interested and loyal in the organization than the actual candidate, then like effectively, like let's say you have a John Fetterman, like let's say we have a DSA elected that is like, actually I'm a huge Zionist and I love capitalism. Then you could effectively be like, okay, we're going to primary you. Here's our candidate. You lose all of our activists, all of our support, all of our funding, and we're going to put someone against you and essentially like basically cripple their chances.
But I mean, do you think that like the DSA has done enough of, because this was kind of Bernie's point, right? Was that like we're talking a lot about the election actually getting people into office, but once they get into office, a lot of their incentive is to pass something, right? Like they want to be able to pass a bill, and to do that, if they do the hardline left-wing bills, they'll wind up getting alienated from other potential moderates who could support another bill that they want to put forward. Do you think the DSA has done enough to work in tandem with their representatives to apply outside pressure on the legislature to pass bills, if I'm making sense?
No, yeah, I get what you're saying, and actually I would say we haven't. I mean, we just haven't. I mean, in the case of, I know New York works very heavily with AOC, like the New York DSA works very heavily with AOC. But when it comes to national DSA, I don't think it's done enough to really communicate with our electeds, really get involved with our electeds, because I feel like there's a myriad of ideas and like groups within DSA. But I feel like if we were to get actually report backs and we were working with these candidates more, if a candidate said, hey, you know, I'm not going to go like for full Cuba health, like full huge this healthcare bill, but I can support this, this, and this. I feel like DSA could be working towards, could use it as a way of building power. Like it could, you know, like actually approach it case by case. Well, meanwhile, what we have is we're not communicating with our candidates as much as we could be, and so we're left out of the conversation entirely.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of the problem is that, like, so like within the Milwaukee DSA, right, our electeds will focus on things that are not necessarily where the base is at, right? So we could be working closer in tandem, but we're out of step. And I don't know how you necessarily bring the electeds in step with the movement itself, or how you bring, like, which one has to happen first? Does the movement have to work in, like, follow the elected, or does the elected have to follow the movement?
I mean, ultimately, the elected has to follow the movement, and if that means that DSA takes a setback, then okay, then we regroup and consider how we move forward and learn lessons from it. But I think if we're talking about building a truly democratic society, you know, a truly like socialist movement, and to have electeds that actually answer to the movement and to the people, which would be a first for America, then I think it all starts with like building that first. And if an elected is truly just out of step and we've tried our everything, then you just come back and regroup and go from there.
Yeah, I think we need some method of punishing them. Like, I think we need like a gulag or like something we can put them in to get them to fall in line.
Yeah, we're actually gonna send them to re-education. That's what the conservatives say. We're gonna send them to re-education camps. Why not?
True. And just we're about 4 minutes left here, so just to go back to our conversation about Trump and the Libertarian Party, I just had some awesome quotes here from Trump. He put on Truth Social, the reason I didn't file paperwork for the Libertarian nomination, which I would have absolutely gotten if I wanted it, as everyone could tell by the enthusiasm of the crowd last night, was the fact that as Republican nominee, I am not allowed to have the nomination of another party. Regardless, I believe I will get a majority of the Libertarian votes.
That's hilarious. That's amazing. It's straight up not true, but also I think it would be really funny if we just let that happen. Like if Democrats and Republicans could run as different parties. Like I want to see like the weird like Democrat that runs as a Libertarian, a Green Party, and a Democrat. I think that'd be hilarious.
You could definitely get an anarchist to do it.
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God. The pure comedy would be great.
Joe Biden, the Libertarian. That would be pretty sick.
Joe Biden, Libertarian. Oh, God bless.
But I love Trump's ability to just go in and say, like, completely make up reality, and people are just like, yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah, they totally love me, and you see every video, and they're just booing them.
Yeah.
Libertarians love me, don't listen to the boos.
Do you think he's delusional and genuinely thinks that people just, like, love him, or do you think that he's just like, I'm going to make this up and people are going to believe it?
There's no way. From everything I've heard of Trump and, like, how, like, his upbringing and, like, just, like, a biography and everything, there's no way he can buy it. It is, like, he's just a grift mastermind. He's just that good at just, like, grifting, and he'll never give it up. I think that's, with most conservatives, I feel like they can't believe it. I mean, Bill O'Reilly, back when he was a big thing, I refuse to believe that wasn't a character.
Really?
Yes, I refuse. But like, we don't have much time left. But I encourage anyone to watch like him debating Jon Stewart, and it's the entire time they're cracking jokes like they're friends. There's no way it's not a bit. There's no way he actually believes the stuff he's saying.